Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you like this episode, please remember to hit the like button and leave a comment or two, then subscribe and click on the bell to receive notifications of whenever we release new videos. Also, please remember to share them to your social media. Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to the Smoky Range trailhead, which is accessible off of Canyon Creek Road. This location is in the Flathead National Forest in northwestern Montana, which is a hotbed for grizzly bear attacks. The geography here is forested mountains which start at a high elevation, then climb to just under 7,200 feet at the top of Standard Peak. The trees here consist mostly of pine, fir, and spruce, but in the valleys pockets of willow and buckbrush offer shade and shelter to animals. Berry bushes and other bushy plants create a hedge-like barrier for anyone trying to see through them in certain areas. Elk, moose, and white-tailed deer are common sights and are an attractive source of food for human hunters as well as animals who predate upon them. The dominant predators here include cougars, wolves, coyotes, bobcats, as well as black bears and grizzly bears. The small mountain town of Whitefish is under 10 miles from the Smoky Range trailhead as the crow flies. This is close proximity to a grizzly bear that can cover that distance on a single afternoon while searching for food. Late summer is an interesting time for grizzly bears in this area. Summer's heat has stressed plants that the bears feed upon, and most berry seasons are in the last weeks of their yields. Food is getting harder to come by for bears, and the added stress of heat and dry conditions force them into cover and shade they would otherwise not search out during cooler, wetter times of the year. This stressor weighs heavier on younger and older bear populations, but particularly hard on sows with growing cubs. Not only do sows need to find enough food for their own survival during hibernation, they must also find enough to ensure the survival of the next generation of grizzly bears. On the afternoon of August 26, 2023, 2 archery hunters were scouting the Smoky Range trailhead area ahead of their elk hunting trip. For privacy's sake, we'll refer to these hunters as Tim and Rick. Their hunting trip was likely planned during the elk rut, which occurs around the middle of each September. During this time, bull elk are vying for control of harems of cows. The winning bull will be more likely to breed the cows and pass on the strongest genes to the next generation of elk. While competing, bull elk sound a loud, high-pitched scream called a bugle, which echoes for miles through valleys. This is done to locate each other and attract more cows for breeding purposes. This vociferous method of communicating is used by hunters as well as predators to find the location of elk herds. Temperatures on this afternoon peaked at 83 degrees Fahrenheit, which is mild for this time of year. By mid-afternoon, moderate breezes had been blowing through the trees, causing any scent on them to be carried to or away from wary noses monitoring them. Tim and Rick had been scouting the area since early morning and were approaching a thick stand of vegetation. They planned to simply bushwhack their way through it and emerge at another spot with a better view from which to glass for elk. Unbeknownst to the hunters, a sow grizzly and her cub had taken up shelter amongst the cover there, likely dozing off while waiting out the heat of the day. As Tim pushed his way through the tangled brush, he encroached on a very deadly and dangerous boundary. The sow, hidden by the bushes as she and her cub lay in the shade, likely heard them once they were only a few yards from her. Eons of protective survival instinct triggered her to investigate such a close intrusion of her and her cub's location. Rick and Tim were only 15 feet from the sow grizzly by the time she made herself known to the hunters. She stormed from her resting place in what must have been a very terrifying surprise to the hunters. The men were only a few yards apart from one another, and Tim was slightly behind Rick when they realized the sow was already upon them. The hunters had undoubtedly considered a close proximity encounter with a grizzly, as they were armed on their scouting trip. The sources I could find did not indicate anything about the firearms they carried, but it is assumed that they carried pistols, as rifles would have been nearly useless in self-defense against a grizzly in brush at close range. No source I could find indicated that they had packed bear spray with them on their trip. As the angry sow quickly advanced toward the hunters, both of them drew their firearms and began to send hot lead her way. During the confusion and speed of the attack, the sow was struck by several rounds from each man. As Tim fired from behind and off to Rick's side, one of his bullets tore through his partner's shoulder. After the gunshots thundered and the sow fell, the grim tally was 1 dead grizzly bear and 1 wounded hunter. Rick's wounds were not lethal, but were serious. The bullet fired by his partner entered through the rear of his shoulder, rendering his arm limited in its use. During the raucous shooting, the cub had disappeared and likely sought refuge up a nearby tree or in a clump of brush. Tim and Rick immediately examined the wound in Rick's shoulder and tried to stop the bleeding as much as possible. They made their way out to their vehicle and got Rick to medical help for treatment of the wound. After being notified of the incident, the Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks wardens began investigating the incident immediately. The sow's carcass was taken for analysis to gather information and confirm the hunter's account of the run-in with the sow and her cub. The grizzly killed during the attack was determined to be a 25-year-old female, which is very old for a sow with cubs. She had no history of conflict with people before this incident and was tagged in 2009 as part of a population survey on grizzlies in the area. Officials immediately began monitoring the location in search of the cub, but I could find no source pertaining to the failure or success of finding it. Depending on its age, the cub may have survived on its own. If it was a cub from the prior spring, it would likely die due to starvation or predation by a boar grizzly bear. After the investigation by the FWP's Wildlife Human Attack Response Team, the sow's behavior was deemed defensive due to the presence of her cub and the lack of conflict with people. Had she not been killed during the attack, she likely would have been left alone, even if she had mauled the hunters, due to the circumstances involved in the attack. After reviewing the facts surrounding this episode, I'm left with a few questions for you. Do you think this attack could have been avoided had the hunters found a route with better visibility? How did the hunters get so close to the grizzly and her cub without being detected? Would bear spray have prevented this attack? Do you think the cub found a way to survive? I hope so. I'll be glad to read and respond to your thoughts, so please post them in the comments section below, and let's talk about it. Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to the Tuscarora Overlook Trail in Duthat State Park near Millboro, Virginia. The hills here stretch about 3,200 feet in elevation, which is high for the Appalachian Range. They're covered in dense growths of oak, maple, and hickory trees that drop their leaves each fall. The evergreens here include pine, fir, spruce, and hemlock trees with pawpaw, black willow, dogwood, and magnolia bushes displaying their brilliant flowers and fruits to keen observers from any species. Wild game animals here include white-tailed deer and turkeys, but raccoons and skunks are also common. Predators in this area include bobcats, coyotes, and black bears. According to the Duthat Park Trail Guide linked below, the Tuscarora Overlook Trail runs several miles into the forest on the west side of the park. It executes hairpins in the trail wherever it climbs, granting hikers amazing views. The emerald greenery shimmers down the valley as the breezes rustle the leaves, like they're under some kind of magic spell. Around 5:30 p.m. on Saturday, August 8th, 2015, 52-year-old Lori Cooksey was hiking the trail and enjoying the outdoors with her family. Along with Lori were her children. Ellis, who was age 19, Hannah was age 16, and Blake was age 22. All enjoyed being active with their mother. It wasn't long into the hike before energetic Ellis disappeared ahead of the other three group members. The dips and turns in the trail created new sights and adventures for the hikers, and the fresh air invigorated them. The family was close and had gone on several hiking adventures together in the past, but today's events would cast a new light on the possibilities the forest presents. Their plans had consisted of hiking treks mixed in with paddling a canoe in the reservoirs in the area. There was nothing in the sources that indicated that they had brought bear spray or a firearm on their hike that day, so it's accepted they had brought neither. Ellis was ahead of the group when a small black bear showed itself on the trail ahead of him. The bear was partially concealed behind a small pine tree, but quickly began to slowly and steadily stalk toward the group. The hikers had already reached the peak in the trail and were on their descent when they ran into the bear. It was only 15 feet away from Ellis and suddenly rose to its hind legs as if it were comparing its size with the young man's. With his mother arriving and standing beside him, Ellis was in a quandary about precisely how to handle the situation. You see, Ellis has always held a deep-seated fear of bears. On each hike they've gone on, they used 3 owl hoots as a universal alert of a bear sighting as an inside joke, more than anything serious. As she looked at the bear, Lori could see a strange look in the bear's eyes. She stated that she and Ellis wouldn't soon forget that look. I've seen this look in person and up close in run-ins with black bears in Idaho. That look is that of absolute indifference, as the animal seemingly calculates the calories expended versus the calories spent, or the risk of injury gathering those calories. The economy of calories that bears have to tally is one that pits a prey animal versus a predator, and the reconciliation of an equation in which no person wants to be on the short side. Ellis and Laurie couldn't help but break formation and run for their lives. The look the bear had given them shook them to their core, and instilled terror. As the duo fled, the bear seemed to anticipate their route and cut them off. It had spent its entire life either learning how to or practicing catching up on its prey, and this prey wasn't fleet of foot. Laurie was trailing Ellis as they ran from the bear, which put her first in line to be caught by it. The bear chuffed as it closed in on her and swatted her in the small of her back, opening up several gashes in her flesh. Seeing no other alternative, they flung themselves down the steep mountainside, hoping that the bear would give up and leave them alone. That day had been a rainy one, and the mud and moist foliage helped the hikers as they slid downhill on their rear ends. Given gravity has her way with any body of mass, they were soon tumbling more than they were sliding. This tactic didn't confuse or discourage the bear, as it immediately pursued them in their downhill escape. As the bear caught up to Laurie, it sank its teeth into the back of her knee and shook its head violently. The wounds it opened up are too graphic for YouTube standards, so I've posted them on my Patreon link, posted below. They're not the worst we display there, but reveal the power and devastation these predators can impart on their victims. Now realizing she may be fighting for her life, Laurie kicked viciously at the bear. She put so much ticked-off mama power behind her kicks that the small sow bear slipped on the mud and rolled onto her back. This gave Ellis and Laurie space and time to flee once again. As the hikers fled back up the trail, they screamed at Blake and Hannah, telling them to run. At one point, Laurie turned and punched the bear, exhibiting her own mama bear power to defend her cubs. Blake had recently graduated from the College of William and Mary and approached the situation with a more academic mindset. Initially, he thought of the cries for help as a prank, but soon realized they were not made in vain. Seeing the blood on his mother's wounds confirmed the seriousness of the situation to him. As soon as the bear came into view, Blake tapped into his nature buff library of bear battling tactics. He told the other family members to get loud and get big. Whether he knew this was a predatory attack or not was not indicated in any source I could find, but his advice was solid gold. In an act of unison, they each began to yell and jump around like a pack of enraged cavemen. They threw sticks up into the air and raised their hands above their heads in a show of force. Upon seeing this group of humans standing their ground and clearly choosing to fight, or at least acting like they were, the sow stopped and examined the group for a few seconds. She seemed unsure if it was worth it, as that accounting of calories she'd been tabulating since the beginning of this attack was no longer in her favor. The noise and demonstration put on by the family convinced her to seek easy food in another place. She turned slowly and ambled off into the brush on the side of the trail. As soon as the sow had left the trail and disappeared from view, the four hikers turned tail and booked it the entire 4 miles remaining on their return to the trailhead. The children marveled at Laurie's ability to complete the journey despite her wounds, but when you have a warrior for a mom, it's kind of expected. The shock of the event would have left me a mumbling mess. Laurie was taken to the hospital where her wounds were cleaned before being closed with 14 stitches in her back and 14 more in her leg. On top of that, she received rabies and tetanus shots just to make sure she didn't contract either disease from her wounds, all while being treated at Lewis Gale Hospital, Allegheny. The Virginia Department of Game and Inland Fisheries and Department of Conservation and Recreation law enforcement officers tracked the black bear aided by a wildlife biologist. They set out traps and baits to lure the bear out of hiding. The bear was found near the attack site and humanely dispatched at 4 p.m. Sunday, August 9th, 2015. As Laurie convalesced in the hospital, her friends regaled her with deliveries of bear claw donuts and beer. Laurie indicates that she doesn't blame the bear, despite its predatory actions toward her and her family. She also says that this event would keep her out of the woods, and that she doesn't plan on going back into bear country anymore. Laurie finalized her sentiments with a statement regarding how the bear attack was surreal. The brave mother is glad the bear attacked her instead of her children. Virginia wildlife officials comment that there are 17,000 black bears in the state, and that attacks are very rare. They report that bear and human interactions are very few on record and consist primarily of the bear disappearing in a cloud of dust at the sight of a person. As for the bear, it turns out she was the mother of 2 9-month-old cubs who were orphaned due to the outcome of this attack. They would stand little to no chance of survival without their mother, and there is no record of agency trying or succeeding in capturing her cubs. They left no comment as to the overall health or age of the sow. After reviewing the details of this attack, I'm left with a few questions for you. Do you think the governmental agencies were justified in euthanizing this black bear sow? Would the black bear have tried to tangle with another human after being kicked and punched by such a protective mama? Was this family's behavior the only way to stop a predatory black bear attack? I'll be glad to read and reply to your thoughts, so please post them in the comments section below, and let's talk about it. Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to central Romania, to the Carpathian Mountains. The South Carpathians have a range called the Addicus Mountains. They are a spectacular high range with peaks stretching over 8,000 feet in elevation and are one of Europe's last remaining wilderness areas. The rocky peaks of the mountains give way to forests at about 6,500 feet in elevation. This range hosts about 6,000 European brown bears, which is about 60% of the European brown bear population, and is one of the few places they are still flourishing. In the Addicus, oak and beech trees shelter bison, wild boar, and Danube Delta wild horses. These animals don't roam freely in much of their prior European habitat, so Romania's efforts to preserve them are admirable. The predators of this area include wolves, lynx, and brown bears. On June 9, 2019, 26-year-old German graduate student Andy Bauer was hiking with his 23-year-old partner, Laura Booth, from Cambridge, UK. They had accepted an invitation to enjoy a 5-day expedition through the Addicus Mountains, backpacking their way from one tent campsite to the next. They were attending graduate school in Berlin, Germany, and looking forward to some time in the wilderness. The life of a student can be stressful, so they took the opportunity while they had the time to do it. As they packed their backpacks for the trip, Laura grabbed her bear spray and placed it in her pile of items to pack. Andy told her that they were more likely to have the bear spray explode than to experience a bear attack, so she agreed to take it out and leave it at home. They drove to a mountain town called Briaza and parked their car in front of a monastery. A priest struck up a conversation with the couple and inquired about their plans. Once they informed him, he cautioned them from going into the mountains. Laura had a sense of foreboding about the trip, but chalked these feelings up to them adventuring into the wilderness. She had been reading about panthers and bears and thought she may have worked herself up with such information. On the first day of the hike, they saw a lizard and a snake. They'd also watched 6 wild boars root around for food on the forest floor. Andy jokingly said they would next see a bear. On the second day of their trip, they had hiked about 3 hours before they came upon a mangled and partially eaten deer fawn. It was fresh and was a clear sign that a bear was in the area. They hadn't seen any bear tracks or scat, so this sudden sight was concerning. Andy was walking about 20 feet ahead of Laura when they walked upon the fawn. They had paused to look the carcass over when they heard a rustling in the bushes right next to them. Andy lifted his gaze from the fawn carcass, and his legs went weak with what filled his vision. An enormous brown bear was standing less than 4 feet from him, and alongside her were her 2 cubs. The sow's shoulder was nearly the same height as Andy as he stood to his full height. The sow swung her head toward Andy and was unaware of the hikers, until now. Upon seeing him, she let out a roar so loud that it vibrated his rib cage. Andy wanted to run, but was frozen in fear. He was facing slightly away from the bear, with her to his right-hand side. His mind was racing so fast that he could not decide what to do. The sow leaped forward and clamped her jaws around his right calf muscle. With a powerful jerk of her massive head, she dropped him to his back and dragged him several feet. Laura was petrified with fear upon sight of the bears. She could only yell at the bear while it jerked Andy from his feet. As she watched, the bear tossed her head back and forth very quickly, which jerked Andy from one side of the bear to the other and then back again. Then the sow dragged Andy several yards into the bushes. Laura followed them into the brush while making sure to stay away from the cubs. As the pain shot through Andy's right calf muscle, he yelled for Laura to help him. Laura screamed out to Andy to punch the bear in the eye, as she had heard somewhere that this was a way to defend yourself during a bear attack. Andy swung his fist at the bear's eye with all of his might. He knew there was nothing Laura could do to help him, so he had to help himself. His punch was perfectly placed and whacked against the sow's head with a loud thud. The bear immediately released her grip on Andy's leg. She turned and gathered her cubs up. The 3 bears disappeared into the bushes, leaving Andy and Laura terrified and bleeding. After watching the bear leave, Laura ran to Andy's side to assess his injuries. She looked his right calf muscle over and could see that the majority of the muscle of his calf had been torn open and his leg was bent in places where it wasn't supposed to. She searched through his backpack, pulled out several socks, and improvised an inadequate but necessary tourniquet. Pictures of Andy's wounds would not pass YouTube guidelines, so I've uploaded them to my Patreon account. It is linked below for your review. Please look at these photos at your discretion, as they are fairly graphic. Once Laura wrapped the socks around Andy's wound, they discussed what action they needed to take next. She was too small to help him walk out, so that option was off the table. The next option they'd considered required Laura to hike up the mountain until she found cell service. Andy agreed to wait for her and speak to himself loudly to scare away any other animals that may approach him. Laura didn't want to leave Andy there by himself, but hiked away, knowing she had to get help for it. She immediately grabbed her cell phone and headed up the steep mountainside. As she climbed, she glanced around, still worried about running into the bears again. Storm clouds gathered on the mountains around her in an ominous sign. After an hour, she got service and phoned first responders, who sent out a medical helicopter to their location. As the helicopter approached, they found Laura and landed nearby. She pointed out to the crew where Andy was as they flew her back to safety. The crew returned without Laura to pick up Andy and take him to a hospital in Briaza. Upon arriving at the hospital there, the medical team recognized Andy's wounds were too serious for their facility. He was immediately flown to a hospital in Targumuras. Andy underwent surgery to clean and repair the damage done to his lower leg during the bear attack. His tibia and fibula had been broken in 3 locations and required the insertion of 3 screws attached to an external cage to hold his bones in place until they healed. After receiving treatment in the hospital in Targumuras, Andy was transported back to Berlin to finish healing from the bear attack. He was bedridden for many weeks before his leg was strong enough to start rehabilitation. His perseverance through a very long and painful rehabilitation routine eventually led him to make a full recovery from his injuries. Now only the huge scars are left to remind him. After reviewing the facts surrounding this episode, I have a few questions for you. Do you think the bear spray may have prevented this attack? Do you think the bears returned to the fawn carcass after seeing Andy and Laura in the area? If Andy had dropped into the fetal position, would his mauling have been less severe? I will enjoy reading and replying to your thoughts, so please post them in the comments section below, and let's talk about it. Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider clicking on the like button and clicking on the bell icon. We'll help you know when we post our new episodes. Posting our video links to your social media profiles furthers awareness, and it's fun. We slashed our prices in our merch store, linked below, so check out the bargains there while you shop. As a member of our human community, remember to adventure bravely and be careful out there, especially in bear country.